I'm Linda Piccini, and today I want to talk to you about what does it mean when people are talking about a 4-thread serger stitch? What exactly does that mean? Because you hear machines being talked about, well, it's a 4-3-2 thread, or maybe it's an 8 thread. What does all of that mean? Well, the very first thing I want to say is a 4-thread overlock stitch is probably one of the most common stitches, and I would say that from a versatility standpoint, it's one of the most versatile and actually one of the ones that I use most often. So let's take a look at our machine. I'm using the Baby Lock Acclaim, and this is a 4-thread serger, but you can also use it either just with 3 threads or with 2 threads. But today we're going to talk about what we can do with a 4-thread stitch. So I've just got 2 layers of fabric. Let's run through some stitches and see what it looks like. Now, every time I use my serger, I don't necessarily have to cut off fabric. You can use the cutting blade to just clean finish some of the edges of your fabric, or you can use it so it actually cuts something off. So this is what a 4-thread stitch looks like. And what it has is a top side, which is the side where you can clearly see the 2 needles. And then you have this overcasting that happens that wraps around not only across the top, but also across the bottom. And from the anatomy standpoint, what you see with these threads going in this direction, well, that's my upper looper thread. Down here is my lower looper thread. So what can you do with that stitch? Well, I'm a big garment sewer, and in fact, I use 4-thread stitching all the time whenever I make something. For example, the top I have on right now. Let's take a look at the side stitching here. Customarily, what I like to do is to go ahead and stitch the side seams of my garment together, and then once I've tried it on and I'm convinced that I don't need to make any adjustments, I'll follow back through with my serger and I'll stitch close to the edge. You can kind of see if you look here that I've got another row of stitching close by. That just essentially means that I use my sewing machine first and then I can stitch right up next to it. These little hash marks on the toe of my foot are what allow me to not go into my seam allowance and allows me to get my stitching right on the edge. Now, one of the other things that I like to do, and again, I'm going to point out my top, I like to take the bottom edge of my fabric, and when my pattern calls for something like a narrow hem, what I do is I use the weight of this thread and I turn it under itself and then back again. So essentially, I've got it weighted down here and I'll turn my thread, my fabric under and then under one more time. And this allows me to get a nice, consistent little serged edge where I really don't have to measure much of anything. Now that's just a couple little tips there, but now I've got a bunch of other samples I want to show you of different applications for a 4-thread stitch. This first one is one where sergers really shine, and this is using lycra fabric, and this is doing a 4-thread stitching. See how clean it looks on the edge, and notice that my stitches don't pop. I love that. This is one where I'm able to put in a piece of twill tape. You can see it sticking out at the end. Well, that twill tape actually makes my stitching for my threads a whole lot firmer, so you can build stability in with stitches. This was used actually on, you can't tell it because it's so firm, this is knit fabric. And so there is a twill tape in here. You can feed this in while you're stitching. Now the next sample that I want to show you is using a 4-thread stitch to piece together fabrics just like you would do if you wanted to do a quilt block. So this is nice because the edges of my fabric are completely encased in thread, and what it does is it helps my quilt top from raveling while I'm carrying it back and forth or working on it. I will also tell you that this is one of my favorite things to do when I buy yardage of fabric. Run it through the serger, get those edges clean finished, throw it in the wash, and then you don't have to worry about all that fabric unthreading itself or getting all messy. Here's a nice little knit piece, and this is put on using a serger. And this, you probably recognize, is where you would be able to make like a top for yourself. And this stitches and stretches really well, just as easily there. The next thing I want to show you, and I'm going to stitch it for you so you can see how easy it is. This is using a 4-thread stitch to gather fabric. And to do that, I'm going to engage my differential feed. Watch how easy this is. perfect. All I did was engage my differential feed, and my 4 thread will allow me to run that fabric through, and it finishes the edge. Now, I love this because if I ever need to take the stitching out and maybe run it back through to make it looser gathers, what I'm able to do is know that I've got a nice edge on my fabric, and this is how easy it is to take out. I just pop it, just like that. And now if I needed to, I can run my piece of fabric back through again. So I love gathering. So not only can I gather fabric this way, I can also gather it and attach it to a flat piece of fabric. And this is using one of our gathering feet, a ruffling foot attachment, which will allow me to gather and stitch it onto a flat piece of fabric at the same time. So now this is introducing a specialty foot, but so far, everything that I've shown you is stuff that you can use with the foot that comes with your machine. The next one I want to show you is how you can make piping. And so this is a piece of piping material that is sandwiched between 2 edges of fabric. Again, finished with a 4 thread overlock. And this is done using a cording foot. And not only can you make piping that way, but you can actually encase it into 2 pieces of fabric at the exact same time as well. All done with a 4 thread stitch. And then one of my last samples is to show you that you can put in a zipper actually using a 4 thread overlock. Look at how perfect that is. So if you don't know what a 4 thread stitch can do, now you've got a little bit of an idea. And when you add decorative threads to the mix as well, you've got a completely different machine at your fingertips. So have fun with the 4 thread stitch on your machine, because like I said, it's the one that I like to turn to most often. Thanks, and I'll see you next time for another tip.